You can tell there's a bar in the back of that boat. Here's the captain with a butcher knife.
Yes.
He looks mighty dangerous there. You weren't married to Lorena Bobbitt, were you? You got a wheel of mean knife.
And this is the old ghost with whom I go back more years than I care to remember.
Yes, it's been
Captain
a
Don
long time.
Yes, it does.
All right, Captain, I think I saw you up in Raleigh somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And Claudio was cooking then. You're paying him back.
Pardon me for 1 second here. I'd like to introduce a particularly good friend of mine, the blood brother, or whatever you want to call this, Captain Don Punker, a fellow that I spent many years at sea with. And
True.
I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Don Punka. Boat captain, yacht captain, number of other titles have been bestowed upon me over the years, most of which you don't care to go into. Is going to be recorded to protect the guilty. But that's about all I can say for an introduction. Other than that, we're just sitting here having a drink and swapping a few lies and sea stories and embellishing the truth to a point that the truth wouldn't be known.
This is April 6th, I think,
April.
1994.
True.
Yeah, it is.
Just in case you wanted to know, whoever
You
this is
haven't had
watching,
it.
could
You
be
haven't
me.
had too many, Claudio. You remember that.
Yes.
Just happened to be passing through on my way to Baltimore and taking up a new venture for the summer.
We're trying to make his stopping over sort of a tradition here. I have a land yacht.
Well, it's like I told Claudio. I finally got my car well tuned enough and trained that we can make a trip from Miami to Baltimore with one stop. However, the aging body has now gotten where it needs more than one stop, so I figured stop here.
Yes.
and it makes the trip easier. Mild libation for the body, I see.
Well, from this point on, just go back to your
Yes.
tales. You were telling John something. What was that?
Oh, yes. So my friend, the descendant of Count de Zafra, is sitting there and says, yes, he says, since the CIA sent me over here to the sands of the Far East, of which I can't tell you where I'm at, he says, the best thing that I can tell you is I want you to use your imagination and visualize what it's like to take somebody that has sat on a camel all of their life and in 90 days try to make them a tank driver. He said it's an interesting experience. Yeah, and I said, yeah, and I guess they were training them for the wars that they knew were up and coming. But yeah, he was a riot.
How old was he at that point?
No, I don't know.
Started out at 15 or so?
Yeah, 15 in the
Legion?
French Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
And then he ended up, and he was in Vietnam, of course, with the French. You know, way before the U.S. went into Nam. And he finally had lost one eye someplace, which did nothing except to make him look twice as ferocious. You know?
Yes, sir.
And it was a little bandy rooster because he was small and slight and the whole thing. But I had a guy, a boat captain came in one day. I hired him and I had a Marine store. And this guy comes in one day and he starts raising hell. And Rick was sitting behind the desk and he's so small and unimposing behind the desk. And all of a sudden I heard this from the front room where I was at talking to somebody else. I heard this, shut up! And I walked in just in time to see him come clean across the desk and grab this great big guy by the neck. And was about to do him in, you know, and I had to break the thing up and get the guy out of there.
What was it over?
But it's amazing when you take a person that is just so highly combative
You ever find out what
And get 'em
provoked it?
toned down and
I
say,
ever
"Whatever."
find out what provoked it?
Oh, it was just, it wasn't that much. It was some mild accusation as to,
His mother. or something.
no, it's just to the honesty of the business deal or something. You know, I'm saying, well, I think you overcharged me or something like that. And Rick's one of those. Are you accusing me of being?
Yeah.
Are you?
Whatever I can get.
Boom! And
I've been pretty much my own agent and own promoter and the whole
But he
thing.
was,
used the
he
name
was
still recently when I've gotten an agent, but she still
Balls
has
of
always
an
left me
individual.
something.
Trying to keep things straight.
Yeah. A week ago.
Oh, okay. So what did you do? Fly back down to Miami?
Yeah, I just flew back down, got in late one night, picked up the car the next morning and split.
Did you get your license back yet?
And which
The
license?
driver's license.
Yes, I finally, I've gotten to be a upstanding, law-abiding citizen.
law-abiding individual.
Yeah,
That's good for you.
disgusting.
Yeah, good on you.
Yes, I have driver's license, insurance cards, and
Oh,
paid taxes.
no shit.
Yeah.
What, last year?
And no, I didn't get last year's file yet, but I will.
Running guns.
And
No, I don't mean this week now. I'm talking about the year before.
yeah, I don't publicly admit to running anything anymore. Having lost a lot of money to our government's predisposition to think that I may have been involved in something illegal.
Yeah, right.
You don't want them to think that.
No. I've been thinking about taking up the ministry.
Great, great. Oh, that's wonderful. You can develop a horde that can follow you.
I used to do a great, with a few drinks to get you started, I used to do a great sermon on the evils of alcoholism, right? And I had a guy seriously on the boat one night, and I really got wound up into this whole tent revival preach, you know. I had a subject that says, this, ladies and gentlemen, this is a typical subject. Come up here, young man, come up here. I want you to see, look at these bloodshot eyes. Look at this poor, decrepit condition this man is in. This is the cause of alcohol.
Yeah, that's where they.
This can happen to you. And I went into this whole thing, right? And I had this one guy, everybody else thought it was quite humorous, except for this one guy that was sitting there like this. And at the end of the whole thing, he called over and he said, "Can I talk to you, Randy?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Can you do that anytime you feel like it?" I said, "Well, yeah, sure." And he says, "Have you ever considered becoming a revival preacher?" He says, I can get you a tent, finance the whole thing. And he says, expand your themes there a little bit. And he said, we can make a few $1 million. And I thought at that time, I said, let me see, the Reverend Captain Don. That ought to sound I was going to do that.
Did you ever get into films, watching movies recently?
Watching or making movies? No, I don't. I
I
quit watching.
remember those.
I quit watching any kind of movies that would not be deemed fit for Walt Disney.
I got you. Well, the Leap of Faith would
Right.
work. Did you ever see it with Steve Martin?
No,
Leap of Faith?
no.
We'd like to
Everyone
apologize
would enjoy.
for the previous lack of
Well
apology.
done. Speaking
Yeah,
of
this kind of
tent revival ministers.
Look, if we're gonna do this, I wanna get next to the preacher here.
Good.
That's right. To get next to those that can save you.
Yeah, that's right.
revive, man, revive.
No, there's a lot to be said as we get older.
This, of course, is Mayor Charles Wood of Blizzard Lick, the fella actually filming all this,
You
although
had
you
to
wouldn't know
stay
it
out.
right now.
You had to spill the beans, you know.
Matter of fact,
One for the road, huh? If it hit me like that, I'd go to the right.
So maybe you could go one step further and start the first full gospel Presbyterian Military and Pentecostal Lutheran Baptist Church of God in Christ Sanctified.
do that whole thing.
Then you'd have it.
John's never heard it. Do that whole thing.
Let's put this on the wheel.
Yeah, you've
film this
got
one.
to do this for
Bruce is
posterity.
going to show Captain
We have
Don
to look into the
a little
camera on
bit
this one,
about getting into evangelism, and this is probably going to be one of Don's specials here. Okay.
Does your life lack religious meaning? Is your mind filled with worldly mumbo jumbo? Then come on down to the first full gospel Presbyterian Military Pentecostal Lutheran Baptist Holiness Church of God in Christ Sanctified, with Senior Bishop Elder Paul McGregor James D. Goodbert Hall as pastor. We here at the Full Gospel Presbyterian Military Pentecostal Lutheran Baptist Holiness Church of God in Christ Sanctified believe the Lord is coming back soon, and we hope you're a member of our church, because if you're not, you're going to hell. So come on down today and join the only church that is going to heaven. We have one church per city and a doctrine for every denomination, and sermons that will tickle the ears of even the deaf. Just think of the thrills of being baptized in a diamond-studded marble line baptismal under spotlights in the name of a four-person Godhead. You'll share in our church's multi-million-dollar financial plan and sit on padded pews in an air-conditioned sanctuary under the ear-tickling sermons of Reverend Hall. And what's more, after death, you're guaranteed an eternal place with the Father of all religion. So look for the gold-plated sign today which says, "Welcome to the First Full Gospel Presbyterian Pentecostal Baptist Holiness Church of God in Christ Sanctified." Just ask for us. Still going. Nothing outlasts the Eternacell battery. They keep going. Going and going.
I love it.
Oh,
What retention. Oh.
That's a good touch.
I used to think of religious experience as taking little girls down there and showing them the
I
staff of
know,
life.
yes, well
That
remembered.
changes the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
I like the double entendre, triple, quadruple entendre and all that. That's very good.
And well done.
Yeah, very well done.
Well, I went to enough churches my first year as a Christian to understand just how extremist some groups can get.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, yeah.
They do have a tendency to get a little carried away.
Yeah.
According to how much money that's coming in, how extreme that is.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
it makes all the difference in the world, I
Like the
guess.
guy that told me I was going to hell because I was taking vitamins because I was not abstaining from the appearance of evil and it looked like I was taking drugs. This was a roommate. I
You'd
didn't
really
keep this
loved me at
roommate
one time in my life, I can tell you.
It's not too fascinating.
Yeah, I sit there and I think about the old days when I was a young man down in the south, looking at some of those Baptist revival meetings down there. And I'd sit there and I'd watch them and I'd say, let me see now, that old boy worked himself about 2.5 hours and I just saw that collection plate go around over there. It reminds me of when Ray Stevens did that thing. He says, would Jesus wear a Rolex on his television show?
Yeah, exactly.
There's an awful lot of truth in the humor that he was projecting there about the late nights, you know, and I think about good old Jimmy Swaggart down there in Louisiana. Now there's a real Christian.
Why don't you take a seat?
Yeah.
Well, there is one big misunderstanding about him, though, which I did some research on him and found out. You know, he didn't make his money through his ministry. You know what he made it from? He made it from his record sales. He wrote all those songs and produced them into records and sold the records, and that's where he made his millions. And he didn't collect the salary from the ministry. He just had millions out of his record sales, and so he lived off that.
I got part of those millions.
Oh, yeah.
records.
All the money from the ministry went actually to the ministry.
No, it's the records that he produces, his songs that he wrote.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he's got
the ministry money stayed with the ministry, in other words,
Yeah.
is your point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He did not receive a salary and still doesn't receive a salary from Jimmy Swaggart Ministries. And when people give him money
What
when
kind
he's
of
out, he
records
takes
was
it
he
in.
producing?
He's
He's always at the
yeah, he's
end.
always had those piano records with
The hymns and all that
those old
stuff that he was
hymns and
saying.
gospel
So
songs.
I'll
He's
give you
got
a
20 or
couple
30
if you
different
want.
records.
I got 15 records. I'll never count. I got.
Shoot, he made millions off of. He's still breaking
Not all
royalties
of
off
Jimmy
those.
Swaggart.
You know, he's breaking royalties off that. And that's how he got his Rolex and his riches. You know, is off of that. So he didn't need to do it through the ministry. But you know, the hypocrisy about him was what got me about getting on. He rode Christians for a long time about going to psychiatrists and counselors outside of the church. The church is all you need. The pastor is all you need for your counseling. You know, if you go outside of the church for your counseling, you know, you're not trusting God. And then here he turns around, he's got a problem. You know, but
I was
he's
kinda
not
like
telling
that with my
anybody
boat
about it.
crew.
He needed a counselor, and he didn't go to one.
I used to always tell my boat crew, don't go to other captains with your troubles, come to me. It was kind of the same idea, you know.
Yeah.
You didn't pass around the head afterwards. Did you?
Well,
If he'd
no,
have went
we
to
did
somebody,
accept
he probably got
favors,
help.
you know, here and there.
You was talking a while ago about the way the Christian things about. I remember someone was telling me about a plane that was going to crash or something, and there was a Baptist preacher on board, and he says, "Everybody says, well, do something, do something." And he said, "What can I do?" He said, "We are a preacher said you're supposed to do something." So he got up and passed around the hat. It was a
Brother Dave Gardner used to do a thing about that too, about the fellow on the airplane, and he looked out there and the wing was burning, and he says, and he saw that fire and he knew a little something about welding, you know, and he said, this isn't going to last too long. And he said, Lord, he said, if you'll just get this plane safely on the ground, he said, I'll give you half of all the money I've got. And he was very rich. And the fire went out, and the plane leveled up, and it came down and made a perfect landing. And they got off the plane, and there's a little preacher right behind, tapped him on the shoulder. He says, sir, he says, I heard what you said about giving half of your money to the Lord. And he says, I'm here to let you know I'm Reverend so-and-so. And he says, no, preacher, you didn't listen long enough, because I made a better deal. You know, he says, I told him that if it crashed, I'd let him have all of it. You know. So anyway,
reminds me of a piece I'd like to dedicate to this occasion called Father Blessing. Father Blessing was an Irishman of an Irish disposition, and rather quick to lose his calm for a man of his ambition. When his blood ran thin by a bottle of gin, much like mine, he was a hard man to console, though nonetheless and by more than a guess he did well in his priestly role. He'd saved many the neck of a self-imposed wreck, and kept many a ship from its sinking, so needless to say it was quite a dismay when the old man himself took to drinking. It seems his inner view changed, so with his mind rearranged, he assumed a new mode in his teaching. So as his church became smaller, and his tales all grew taller, he gave his soul to this new way of preaching. Said he, pardon me, I have to become an Irishman. To all your followers here, who come guided by fear, and are lacking in inner ambition, I've concocted a cure that'll heal you for sure, and remedy your futile condition. Now since from inner neglect, we all lose self-respect, let's at least make good use of our loss, and since you've lost your direction, which is plain to detection, any time to stop bearing that cross. Now, there's nothing quite as fearful as a life less than cheerful, due to ways you have learned to perceive. So when you lose all good senses due to inner pretenses, it's quite a cure when you learn to believe. Now if you'd like just a sample of the perfect example, so keep your eye on the spokesman of sin, who has gone to great length to muster courage and strength by the neck of a bottle of gin. Well, you've heard of such preachers as their only good teachers, by the ways of their weakness and woes. So just learn to detect what such fools do reflect, and perceive that not anything goes. So learn from the mistakes of such preachers and fakes, and discover the meaning of life. For although they seem fools, they are heavenly tools, who guide by their misfortunes and strife. Well, now that I've spoken, which is my gift and your token, I so hope you have learned to perceive that there is no need for the strife on the wrong end of life, and it sure is a cure to believe. Thank you, lads.
What if he could done that like the marquee?
No, I've never heard that in me heart for the Irish. I couldn't trade it for the world if I could come to lay it at me feet.
Give us another one, Bruce, come on.
Oh, there was once an old priest in the
Wait for Charles. I like the one about the one about the spittoon.
Oh, okay.
It's one of my favorites.
Commercial, yeah.
Yeah.
Old Zeb Taylor never dreamed there could be any harm in leaving his tobacco spit can by the stove overnight. Until late, one night, something terrible began to conceive from the contents therein. Something incredibly awesome began to mutate by the heat of the stove, which caused it to grow, and grow, and grow, until it became the creature from the Black Spittoon, a Scuzzy Wads production. Watch it devour entire tobacco fields and spit them out over major cities of North Carolina. The creature from the Black Spittoon, coming to a tobacco field near you. Rated D. Decent people not admitted unless accompanied by Scuzzwater Sleazebag. And if rock hard tartar is forming around your teeth and you just can't break it loose, then try the Pokematic Pneumatic Toothpick. His patented jackhammer action cleans your teeth right out of your mouth. Pokematic Pneumatic Toothpicks by Checkerboard Smile. They'll try to sell you anything on TV.
oh yeah, yeah.
Truth though.
Thinking about Claudio's little thing thing there about the preachers always reminds me of that story about the young preacher that goes in there and he gives a sermon and he comes back and he asks the old man there, the old timer, he says, how did I do? And he says, son, you didn't do good. You didn't do good at all. He says, there's no fire. There's no hell and brimstone. You have nothing going here. And he says, well, how do you, after all these years, get fired up to do this? And he says, do you see that glass up there that looks like water? That's not water, that's vodka. He says, now you go up there, you'll see when I start stumbling a little bit, he says, I have a couple drinks, and he says, I take a couple breaths, and he says, and the inspiration comes. And he says, and I can preach. And he says, now next Sunday, you give that a try. So the kid did. He went up there and he coughed a couple times. Ladies and gentlemen of the congregation, excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen of the congregation, and he starts, and he gets wound up, and he says, he's thinking to himself, he's thinking faster than he's talking fast. And he says, I want to have another drink or two of this. Then he gets into about the 6th or 7th drink, and the glass is about empty, and he is wound up, and he is giving them a sermon. He comes down off the pulpit at the end of that thing, and he says, all flushed and enthusiastic, he says, well, he says, how did I do? He says, well, son, he says, you did very good. He says, but you've got to remember a few things. He says, Samson slew the Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. He didn't kick the shit out of them. But you can get a little carried. I've done that myself with a couple of extra drinks.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard there was one extra line on that. He said, and there's a taffy pulling contest.
Oh, that, no. It continues. Yes, it says, David slew Goliath. He didn't kick the living shit out of him. He says, and we're having a taffy pull at St. Mary's Church next Sunday, not a Peter pull at St. Taffy's.
That's it.
Well, enough fun at the expense of religion.
But it's so expensive.
You know, the funny thing about it is probably those of us that poke more fun at religion than the others, particularly like those of us that are at sea and so forth, probably are the staunchest, truest believers.
That's true.
The strongest
Yes.
believers, you know.
I find that.
And you know, there's been a number of nights out there when I've sat there and seriously said, dear Lord, I need to have a little talk with you about these sea conditions out here. You know, I'm trying to be good and brave and tell my people, say, this is nothing. You should have been with me in 48 when it was really rough out here. But as I keep reaching for my life jacket, I know that there is a problem here.
Yeah, if you read about the relationship between Jesus and Peter, you know, I mean, Peter was a fisherman. He was, what do you call, very unpolished, you know, very impetuous.
Most fishermen are,
Yes.
having been a fisherman at one time.
But that was a very special relationship. And Jesus hung around with a bunch of old fishermen, a bunch of publicans, and a bunch of sinners. And some of the guys he hung around with were originally cutthroats at one point, before they got to know him.
That's bad.
Good bunch of lads.
Hey.
Yeah. Authentic, anyway.
And it really surprised me after I became a Christian and I read the Bible and I saw how there were some people in the Bible that were so cotton-picking religious that even Jesus couldn't stand to be around them.
Mm-hmm.
And that just floored me when I saw that, and that gave me a true picture of what he was really like.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that's wrong with so many. You know, I remember I quit being I was a police officer years ago, and I quit being a police officer because I couldn't stand the people I had to work with. I couldn't stand other cops. And I think I looked around at religion at the time when I should have been more active in the church, and I looked around at some of the people that were in there, and I says, no, I can't. Not only can't I be like them, I can't even associate with them. You know, they just drive me right up the wall. But there are times at 3 in the morning when the seas are running 12 to 15 feet, when you suddenly feel an awful lot closer to God.
Kind of gets your attention.
He gets your attention at that time, and you sit there and say, can we talk? You know?
Yeah. When you start feeling close to Davy Jones's locker, it's time to get close to God.
Yeah, you hate to think that that's the only time, but
Yeah,
after
exactly.
a number of times of that happening, you do get to, your changes in beliefs may not necessarily fit the Orthodox or the perception of the Orthodox Church or whatever. I still have no great desire to take and run over there and kneel down in front of some guy with a robe that's going to sit there and say, all right, all you guys get off the grass. That just doesn't do much for me. You know.
I got to remember that.
You know, and
So what you're basically saying is at times like that, your conversation with God just becomes a lot less casual.
Yeah, and I don't need a go-between.
Gotcha.
You know, when I need to talk to him, I know where to find him. You know, I'm kind of like Brother Dave says. I have a direct number. I know exactly how to get through there.
Yeah, a friend of mine went overseas. It was one of the most profound things that I'd ever heard somebody say. When he met with a bunch of people from different countries that were missionaries, and they were from, Soviet Union and Chile and just from everywhere in the world. And they had this big convention that he went to, and they all stood in a circle to pray, and they joined hands. And when everybody was praying, he felt the presence of God very strongly. He said for the first time in his life, he realized that God was not an American.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Whoever's watching, and like I said, it could be me. I might be talking to myself right now. So consider this a courtesy. This is a portion of the evening of April 6th when Captain Don Panka and his friend John came over to visit, including John Satrazimus, Bruce, James, Mayor Charles Wood of Lizard Lake, and Captain Don Panka himself. Not to forget, last but not least, myself, Claudia Nidbrock. I'd just like to give a toast to a very special evening of friends reunited. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's worth a toast. Cheers.